Hello.
Hi, Amandeep. How are you? Good morning. I can't hear you.
Hi, Namrata. Good morning.
Good
My name is
morning.
Priyansor.
Oh, Beyant. Okay, I was told that Amandeep is joining, so sorry about that.
She'll be joining soon. I think
Okay,
she was on the way. So,
okay.
so
All
how do
right.
you want us to proceed? I guess it's like a webinar session, right?
Yeah, sure. So we'll do it like the last time. We'll open up right in the end. Maybe uh because if you like last time I did try and make it more interactive, but then I realized that the sheer number of students is so high that we
Ex-
can't make it interactive because we lose out on the time of the session.
Hmm.
So I'd like to think that the best way forward would be to have them last 5 minutes for question answers. We'll give them that, and maybe in the first part of about 1 hour 25 minutes I'll carry on with the session, because then we wasted a lot of time last time, I remember, because they started asking questions in the middle of the session.
Actually, yes.
I think we'll go with that. Anything else that you'd like to share or add?
No, I think that would be all. Can I have like a brief description about you? So,
Okay, did you had that the last time, because you'd given something before the session? Do you want me to share something right now, like a Word document or something?
uh, just a
Because
second. I guess
yeah,
I had that.
yeah, because in the last session you had uh
Yeah, I have that, Namrata. I
ठीक है, perfect. So that's what you need to share.
Yes, I just need to like introduce you and then I'll just hand it over to you. We
Yeah,
can
yeah.
keep the chat box open in case
Yes,
any
so they can
any
keep, yeah, and
question.
you can keep a track of the questions. And, when we start the question answer, or if they have a doubt in what I'm discussing, I think that's the time that we can open the chat box and pick up a question. Because if they have a question with regard to, let's say I'm doing a writing section, and they have a question with respect to that, then we can address that question. If you feel that this test taker is like lost, he or she is not able to follow. Otherwise, ideally, the questions can be taken up in the end, because it will help um, to keep the flow of the session.
Sure, sure. How about if we keep like the chat box open throughout the
Yeah.
session?
You can, but
So,
only thing is that you will have to keep a track of it, because I will be in this session and I will be delivering. So I
Don't worry. Okay.
yeah, so because normally it gets a little distract. I mean, I can do it once or twice, but if I
Mhm.
keep switching between chat and the session, then I can get a little, the flow of thought goes
Yes.
away when I'm
Okay.
delivering.
No problem. I'll just park the questions for later. Whenever
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you'll ask for the Q&A,
Yeah.
and
And
we'll
I'll
proceed.
mention, yeah, and I'll mention to them that you can park your questions. I mean, you can write your questions in the chat box, and we'll park them for the end of the session. And we'll keep about, because last time I think thoda sa we had overstretched because the questions were a lot. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see, like, instead of 5 minutes, 7 minutes, or 8 minutes, we can give to the questions, depending on how many queries come our way. Okay.
Sure.
All right. So you let me know when we have to start. I'll just unmute myself and yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. हो गया हो गया हो गया. Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's IELTS Masterclass. So, let me tell you something about today's trainer. Her name is Namrata, and she has over 10 years of language training experience, and she has a master's in psychology. She is a CELTA certified trainer who started her journey in 2014 as an English language teacher. She has been part of several projects imparting language training to cohorts of teachers. Namrata has taught in Canada, France-based language teaching company and imparted IELTS training to numerous batches of students with IELTSmaterial.com. She also has completed the Train the Trainer program from NABET. Namrata has been managing IELTS batches at the Linguistic Academy for over 3 years now. She has a versatile experience and she has delivered life skill workshops in schools and colleges. She frequently delivers customized communication corporate workshops to middle level managers. So let's start today's session and welcome Namrata. Hi Namrata, over to you.
Namrata, I feel you need to unmute yourself. Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
now
yes, I
we
needed
can.
to be unmuted. Yeah, good
Yes.
morning, everyone. Thank you
Good
so much,
morning.
Bian, for that introduction. And good morning to all the test takers or the future test takers. I hope you're all able to hear me clearly and also I am visible. If you could just give me a thumbs up. Yeah, all good. Bian, I'm audible, right? It's clear, the voice. All right, great, great. Thank you so much for the introduction. We'll dive right into the session. So today's session is going to be about, of course, IELTS and all the four skills of IELTS. And we're going to look at how you as test takers can better equip yourself with some of the strategies across all the skill sets. So the first thing that I'd like to discuss is why do we have the IELTS test? What is it that you need to be aware of and keep in mind to prepare for the different sections of the IELTS? We'll also look at some examples and explanations and top tips for the question types. And of course, in the end, we'll have some time for question and answers. So all of you are requested to put your questions into the chat box at any time. You feel a question that comes up, you can put it in the chat box. The last 5 to 7 minutes would be solely dedicated to questions. So we'll take those up right in the end. All right, so let's start with the most basic. What is IELTS, right? So I'm sure some of you may have taken the test before. A few of you may have been preparing for it as well. So of course, it is the International English Language Testing System. It is designed to really assess the language ability for anyone who wishes to either study or work, who wants to immigrate. And English is the most widely spoken language of communication, and therefore, the IELTS is a test which provides you the scores as proof of your language proficiency to be able to either work or study in the different countries. For example, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, US, all of these are taking the IELTS scores as a proof. Now, remember that over 12,000 institutes worldwide are accepting the IELTS score. It's offered 4 times a month in more than 140 countries. And I'm sure most of you are aware that it is held on Saturdays and Thursdays. Moving on, what is it that we know about IELTS? What is it that we need to know more on IELTS, right? So, of course, we'll do a quick questions here. I'd like you to put your answers in the chat box to all of these questions, and then I will show up the answers for these. So all of you are requested, just take a minute, put down the answers for these questions here. How many sections are there in the IELTS exam? Of course, what does it stand for? I just gave it away when I had talked about the previous slide. How many passages do you have in the reading section? How much time do you have for the writing section? Number 5, how many questions are there in the listening section? And how long is the speaking test? And finally, how long will it take to get to the IELTS exam results? Those are your 7 questions on the screen. Everyone to put their answers in the chat box. When the chat is activated, right? You can put the answers in the chat.
Yes, Namrata.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's start with the answers right away. So the first one, you have answers on the right here. So of course, the 4 sections are your reading, writing, listening, and speaking sections. IELTS stands for the International English Language Testing System. You've got 3 passages in the reading section. You've got 60 minutes for the writing section. The questions in the listening section are 40. You have 11 to 14 minutes for the speaking test, which is allocated for a face-to-face speaking test with the examiner. And lastly, it takes you 30 on the 13th day. On a paper-based test, you would get your exam results the 13th day. And in the case of a computer-based test, it's faster. You would receive it in 3 to 5 days. All right, so let's look at this a little more closely now and look at what exactly are we looking at in all the 4 sections, right? So let's start with listening. You've got 40 questions, right? You've got approximately 30 minutes for this section. And in addition to that, you've got about 10 minutes transfer time. Remember, this is in your paper-based test, all right? In the reading section, you've got 40 questions with 60 minutes to answer those 40 questions. Writing tasks, there are 2 tasks. You have task 1, task 2. You've got 20 minutes and 40 minutes. So those are the time allocated for task 1 is 20 minutes and task 2 is 40 minutes. And lastly, speaking test, which again has 3 tasks. We will look at all of this in detail as we move along. Speaking test is anywhere between 11 to 14 minutes. All right, I'd like to take a moment here and let you know that your registration for IELTS, your tips, everything that we will do here today would be your strategies, your tips. However, in the event you want to go more in detail on any of the section, feel free to log on to the IDP IELTS website where you can register for the IELTS. You can look at all the information available that you would need, your tips for all the 4 sections. It will also give you the different course material along with any other information that you might need. There is an email ID and a phone number for you to contact. This is the website. It's called the IELTSidpindia.com. Now let's look at certain basic general strategies that you need to keep in mind, which are absolutely important, right? The first is to know your goal, right? Before you begin your IELTS preparation, before you begin the whole process of when it is that you want to take the test, you must know your goal. What is your goal? What is it that you wish to achieve in all the 4 sections? And what is your overall bag? Now, remember, to get an overall 8, you need to have a 9 in the listening, 8 in the reading, at least a 7.5 in the writing, and 8 in the speaking. So that would give you an overall of 8. It's imperative that you know your current English level, because that would be the stepping stone for you to know what would be your current IELTS level, right? Remember to know the structure, the rules, the timing, and the question types. So before you actually take the final test on the day, you must prepare with as many practice test papers as you can. You must have a strategy in line to address all the 4 sections and the questions across all the 4 sections. It's extremely important that you know that, all right, in each particular task, in each particular section, how are you going to go about your process of answering? Developing an English brain. I think this perhaps is very important. Sometimes when we tend to think in Hindi, and then we tend to kind of, well, it could be Hindi or it could be any other language where the local language. So, for a Korean, it'll be his language, right? So our first spoken language or our native language is what tends to be the go-to language for us. However, if you want to really ace the exam, you have to focus on developing your English brain so that it comes to you effortlessly, right? The responses, the answers. So the right way to do this would be, which I will discuss in the end, is read as much as you can, right? Hear as much as you can. The more podcasts you can hear, the more videos you can watch. It'll help you to build your vocabulary. It'll help you to build your overall understanding, comprehension ability. Practice with authentic material. This perhaps is very important. A lot of times test takers end up practicing on materials which are not original, which are not authentic, which may not be the right, right way or the right type to practice on. Therefore, it's very important that you log on to the authentic websites where you will get this material, which is as close to and as replicated to the actual test. Let's begin with the listening section, which will be our first one that we're going to cover today. We'll have 30 minutes, 4 parts, and 40 questions, right? Remember, anytime you have any questions, you can keep putting them in the chat box. As I mentioned earlier, we will take up any questions right in the end of the session, right? Now, remember, this is your ability to understand spoken English. And therefore, the listening requires you to listen to people who have certain monologues or dialogues. There will be a total of 4 recordings that will come your way. You'll have a range of native speakers, right? People who are using English as their first native language, right? There are going to be 10 questions per part. So 4 recordings, that would be 40 in all. Remember, the recordings are played only once. So it's very important that you pay complete attention and not get distracted. Of course, in the paper-based test that I mentioned earlier, the transfer time is 10 minutes. Now, remember, the questions are designed in a manner that they test your ability to understand main ideas, detailed information, the opinion and attitudes of the speakers who are speaking, the purpose of what is being said, and lastly, how ideas grow and change. So it's very important that you pay complete attention without any distractions, because the moment you get distracted, you're likely to miss out something that has been spoken, right? And remember, since the recording is only played once, there's no way that you will be able to hear it again. Now, these are a few skills and strategies. Remember, all of this will be available on the IDPR's website, right? So anything that you want to go further and look at and read about, feel free to log on to the website. Now, the listening module will have certain skills and strategies, right? And they will have certain test practices. Now, in the interest of time, we will only look at one as a sample for you to understand. However, there are various others. So it's important that you orient yourself to the text, you listen for specific information, you identify detail, follow a description if it's a map or a diagram or a plan, right? Which is what we're going to do today. So let's start with this example. Label the diagram below. Write no more than 1 word for each answer. Now remember, no more than 1 word. It's very important for you to read the instructions very carefully. This is the diagram right on the screen for you. There are 1 to 5 serial numbers with certain blanks across them, and you need to label this diagram with no more than 1 word. Right? So once you've looked at this, I will now play the recording in a bit, but remember the tip. You need to use the questions to help you follow the talk and find the answers. Right? But remember, you also have some time before the talk begins. So it's a great idea to quickly read through the questions, because that enables you to know what is it that you're listening for. Because remember, the moment you have the questions, you have a fair idea of what is coming along your way. So it helps you to be a little better prepared and also utilize that time that you have before the talk begins. Right? So I'm going to quickly start the audio. But before that, I request you to just confirm to me that the sound is... Can you hear the audio?
Track 10.
Is the audio...
Yes, Namrata, we can hear it.
Okay, great, great.
Track 10.
Namrata, is the volume is not, I mean, it's not clear. It's breaking, and sometimes we are not even able to hear it.
It's not clear?
No, ma'am.
Okay, just give me a moment. Just give me a moment. I'm starting it again. Just let me know if it's
Track 10.
Every home and office should have a
Yes,
fire
it's audible
extinguisher.
now.
Although there's a good chance that it will sit on the wall for years collecting dust, it could end up saving your property or even your life. So, what does a fire extinguisher consist of? The main part of the extinguisher is simply a large metal container that is cylindrical in shape, rather like a bell jar. In the past, these used to be red.
Sorry.
But nowadays they come in many different colours. The container is full of water or some other substance, such as foam, that can be used to smother a fire. At the top of the container is a lever, and attached to the lever there is a thin extended pin that goes down into a gas cartridge. This looks rather like a small bottle or flask, and is right in the centre of the extinguisher. Below the lever there's a curved handle, which is used to hold the extinguisher and direct it at the fire. On the other side from the handle, there is a horizontal nozzle that opens when the lever is pressed and emits a jet of water. At the neck of the container, there is a small coiled spring that holds the pin in place, and this is connected to a long tube which runs from the spring to the bottom of the container. This is called the discharge tube, which is where the water comes out of the extinguisher into the air.
All right. I hope that was able to everyone and you were able to get an idea of the answers. I'm going to go right ahead. So remember, once you've had a look, and like I said, once you've had a look at the questions and you're aware of what is being asked, and then when you hear the recording, you are aware of the blanks, you are aware of the fact that this is a fire extinguisher, you are aware of the fact once you've looked at this that you have to...
चलो जरा सी
Sorry.
ठीक है हाँ हाँ, ये सैनिटाइजर, ये फायर एक्सटिंग्विशर है, रंग इन्होंने नीला दिखाया हुआ नहीं, वो क्लास
Sorry, I think Amandeep needs to be muted. All right. Okay. Amandeep, if you could just mute yourself, please. We can just hear your conversation. Thank you. All right, so you know that here you've got the blanks and you've got the options, and this would help you to hear more clearly, hear actually for what it is that you have to get the answers for, right? Now let's look
Track
at
10.
now the part of one is now look at the column on the left is talking about the large container filled with or contains water or foam. So full of, right? Your second one is lever, right? If you look at the second option, where you're looking at your second option, pin, where you're looking at long, lengthy, or extended, followed by handle, which could be bent or curved. Nozzle emits, gives off, discharges. So remember, you must be aware of the synonyms because that will greatly help you to understand what the speaker has said. It helps you to make sense of the recording and pick up the keyword that you need to fill the blank with. Tube, water, leaves comes out through this, right? So if you look at Palanivel, if you have a question, I request you to put it in the chat box. I can see that your hand is raised. All right, so if you go back to the original diagram, you look at number 1, which is container filled with water or foam. Number 2, which is your pin, long pin. Number 3, which is the handle, right? Number 4, which is the jet. Nozzle gives off jet of water. And number 5, water leaves through this tube, right? So I'm going back and taking you to the description again, just for you to understand. So your part 1, which is large container, which is what this is come from the recording. So remember, these, what we've filled out here is what the recording said, and we picked it up, and that helped us to find the final answers, because remember, the instruction was no more than 1 word, right? That's what the instruction said for the listening and for the answers, right? So remember some of the common mistakes that we make is not paying attention to the instructions. The second is not predicting, right? So you end up actually using, remember, you can't hear the recording again, right? So you can't predict, you have to be able to hear it. So the moment you lose concentration, you will end up losing the content and therefore make a mistake and have an error in the response. You could also, your leaving answers blank would obviously make you lose marks. Distractors. Now, I'd like to spend a moment here. Distractors are specifically used in the IELTS to confuse the test takers. So what does distractors mean? Now, it can happen in 2 ways. One is that the speaker is saying something and then he will quickly correct himself. So as a listener, in your mind, you've heard, let's say he says football. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant cricket. Now you have heard the word football and now he's self-corrected to cricket. The answers in the options will have football as one option. Now you're likely to choose that because that's what you heard in the recording. However, he has self-corrected and the answer is cricket. So that's your one way of distractor, example of distractor. The second is that there are 2 speakers and one has said something and the second speaker has corrected him. That, no, it's not this, it's actually this. Oh yeah, I agree with you, that's right. So the conversation between the 2 speakers will have a correct option coming in after the incorrect option. So you as a listener who's only listening once is likely to again pick up on the wrong option. So remember not to let these distractors confuse you, because the incorrect option that has been spoken in the audio is likely to also be a part of the answers. So let's say the speaker has said cricket and the options will have cricket, rugby, football. And he has spoken about football and then self-corrected to cricket. You're likely to go with the football option and lose marks, right? So remember, these are some of the common mistakes that you need to avoid while you attempt the listening section. Let's move to the reading section. Now remember, reading is not testing your knowledge. It is testing your reading skills. Therefore, you must have strategies, because the idea is that the more you're able to save time with reading fast, that much time you will have left with you to answer the questions, right? So your strategy has to be able to read in the quickest possible time, gaining the maximum knowledge of the text that has been given to you. Remember, it is not testing your knowledge. You just need to pick up the responses from the text. You've got 60 minutes, 3 sections, 40 questions. The passages would typically contain 2,200 to 2,750 words, right? You've got 3 strategies, and we're going to look at all of these 3 in detail at the moment. So you've got skimming, scanning, and reading for detail, right? So let's start with the format first. So you have 40 questions. The test is divided into 3 sections. Each section will have 1 text, and you typically have 10 to 15 questions per text, right? And the text length is anywhere between 600 to 900 words. Now, let's look at the first reading strategy, which is scanning. Now, scanning typically is a manner in which you're quickly reading rapidly to find the specific facts, right? A good practice is to use your finger to direct you and help you build concentration while you
Namrata, you are on mute.
Namrata, yes.
Okay. I hope I'm audible. Can you hear me, right?
Yes, you are
Okay.
audible now.
So remember to use your finger to direct you to help concentrate while you're scanning. Now, how does scanning help us? Okay, we're going to quickly look at this with the help of an example. Now, I'm going to show up this text on the next slide, and I'd like you to quickly look at it and read the question below. This is the title of a brochure. Now, what information do you think it will have? So the moment you scan, you get a general text of what it is that the whole passage is talking about. So remember, your scanning takes the least possible time, and it helps you to understand the text in as least possible time as possible. Because remember, that is the first strategy that you are using. Right? Now let's look at the second strategy. Now, before that, I'd like you to look at this text. I'm going to just show this up to you. All right. Now you need to find 3 tour start times, 2 prices, 2 ages, and 1 phone number. All right. I'm going to show up this text to you just for a few seconds more. You can read from the screen what is it that you need to find. Right. Now I'm going to show up the text again, and I'd like you to just the 10, but 30 seconds is what I'm going to give you. All right. Those of you who are able to find the answers, you can write them in the chat box. All right. So if you look at this carefully, you will realize that the moment you found the first answer, which was 3 tour start times, right, you were able to then pick up the next subsequent 3 options. So this 2 start time, if you see, is very clearly written as 11 a.m., 2 p.m., and 3 p.m., right? The moment you had that, you could go below and look at the prices, which were 4.5 pounds and 3.5 pounds. And right next to it, you had the ages mentioned, which is under 26 and 12. And right below that, you had the phone number. So this is the first example that I'm showing you, that the moment you are able to find one keyword or information in the question, it helps you to locate the answers in the passage, because you're able to quickly scan the passage by passing your eyes over the paragraphs, right, to find the keyword or the information from the question. Right? Now, let's look at the second, which is skim. Right? So skim reading is reading quickly to get the general content and layout, right? Where you're not really reading every word, but you're getting an overall impression of a text or part of a text, right? It is advisable to pre-read the text for the overall meaning when answering the questions, so that you're able to quickly check if you've located the correct part of a text once you've scanned for a keyword or idea. Right? So the best way is that you skim quickly, read the questions, right? And remember, the moment you're able to find one keyword or information, it will help you, because you're able to scan. Once you've sort of skimmed, you're also able to quickly scan by looking over that area. Wherever you're seeing, is there anything else that you need to quickly pick up? Because remember, you're saving time. The strategy is, the more time you're able to save in reading, the more time you will have to answer the questions. Right? And always try to understand a few sentences around the location of the answer. So the moment you've located the answer, just try and look above or below, just to get a little more sense of the sentences around it. Right? But remember not to spend too long to find one answer, because you're going to lose out time for the other answers. Right? So let's look at an example of skimming. All right. I'm showing up a passage to you, and I'd like you to read it, and then we will look at the questions. All right. So what did you understand from the text? I'd like you to put your answers in the chat box. All right, so we were able to get a sense of that the answer, the text was about breakfast, pretzel, right? What it is that we need to not buy. So typically healthy eating, right? In a sense of the quick skim reading that we did, we were able to understand, right? So remember that answering all the questions or all the question numbers and will make you understand that there's a specific pattern, right? Once the first answer is visible, like I said in the previous slide, you're able to look for quickly for the others, right? So the questions that we have is, what did you understand? So remember, when you read this soft pretzel, you were quickly able to get to healthy eating or soft pretzel, or what is it that we need to avoid when we're eating outside. So these were some of the things that were able to quickly, you were able to gather, even though you didn't read each and every word. You were able to gather the overall meaning, right? Now let's come to intensive reading. This is where you need to read the short text thoroughly with clear goals. And this is a step that comes after skimming and scanning. This is the third step. Now here you need to really read every word with concentration to understand the full meaning of the text, right? Because here you need to understand that is this any particular information that you're looking for needs to come through intensive reading. So you will have to follow that process to be able to get to the answer that you're looking for. And therefore, the scan or the skim reading would not suffice here. Intensively reading every word to understand the full meaning. So remember, there could be a vocabulary word that you don't quite follow. However, when you're reading intensively and you're reading the full sentence, it will give you a sense of what is it that the passage is trying to convey. Right? So typically your true, false, or not given type of questions is where you need to really pay attention and read intensively, because you need to understand that is this clearly information given in the passage. So it would be true, right? If it is an opposite statement in the passage, then it's false. However, the statement is neither being confirmed nor contradicted by the information in the passage, and therefore it would be a not given. And therefore it requires you to read intensively, right? Now, what is it that comes first, text or questions, right? So remember, you need to be able to read the text, the questions first, because that gives you a sense of what is it that you're looking for, right? So let's look at the first passage. Of course, this is rather long. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show up the questions first. All right. So the instructions and the statements are as follows. Do the following statements agree with the information given in the reading passage 1? All right. So you need to write true if the statement agrees with the information, false if the statement contradicts the information, and not given if there is no information on this. So the number 1 is the main theme of the conference was pets in school. Okay. Now let's look at I'm just taking up one passage here for you to get a sense of what is it that we're trying to understand, right? So every school should have a dog or another pet to reduce the stress in the classroom, says Anthony. So if you notice at statement 1, the main theme of the seminar was pets in school. Now, Sir Anthony is speaking about a conference about the need to improve young people's sense of. So this is your first paragraph, right? So in the first paragraph, look at the last line. In the education conference, examined how to respond to the stresses and anxieties facing young people. So again, one of the things that you have to keep in mind is synonyms. So when you have seminar in the question, what are some of the synonyms that you could think of? So conference is definitely one of them, right? Now, if you look at the Statement. It's saying main theme, seminar, and pets in schools. These are your keywords that you're picking up from the statement. If you look at the passage, conference, synonym for seminar. Right? Now, when we read the paragraph intensely, was the main theme of the conference about pets? Well, we need to really read carefully because you are talking about the conference, which is the need to improve young people's sense of well-being. And therefore, this is a no, because you clearly see a contradiction to it. Right? Because the main theme of the seminar was pets in school. That's the statement. So obviously it's false because you have a contradictory statement available to you in the passage, which will come to you when you read intensively the two statements or the one sentence. Now let's look at the second one. Online platforms such as Facebook and Twitter can have a negative effect on young people's mind. Now again, this is a statement that we need to understand whether it has been given in the passage, that would be true. Whether a contradictory statement has been given in the passage, then it will be false, or whether it is not given at all. So there is no information to this effect in the passage. Now I've again picked up one paragraph from the text where we're looking at, if you look at more pressurized, right? That's the key word from the passage. If you read intensively, you're talking of relentless presence of social media, made growing up more pressurized. So made growing up is referring to young people who are growing up, right? Again, looking at synonyms here. He said this could be all pervasive for teenagers, making them compare their own experiences with the perfect lives on social media, leading to stress. Now it's leading to stress, right? It could also normalize exposure to harmful material on subjects like self-harm or eating disorders. However, we are looking at the keywords of online platforms, young people's lives. So if you pick up synonyms, social media and teenagers, right? These are some of the synonyms that you can find. And it's talking about how it can lead to stress, which is equivalent to creating a negative effect. And therefore, this would be a true statement because we see that a similar meaning has been indicated in the passage, which you can pick up from the synonyms. Now let's look at this more in detail for the third statement. All right. Now, this third statement, if you go back, is talking about, I'm just going to take it back for you to know, there is evidence that the presence of pets in schools helps kids with mental health issues. This is the third statement, and we need to know if it's true, false, or not given. All right. So your keywords here is evidence. That's your first keyword. Your second keyword is presence of pets in schools. And your last keyword is mental health issues. Now let's look at the passage to understand where it could be. Now, in the third paragraph, if you look at the secretary called for more attention to be paid to ways of building up children's well-being by teaching them emotional resilience, sense of character. And then he talks about approaching reducing anxiety by soothing presence of animals such as dogs. Now, dog is a category of pet. However, if you read further, is it matching? We're looking for evidence, right? Because the key word in the statement is evidence. Now, it goes on to say the quickest and biggest hit we can make to improve mental health is for children to feel safe and to have at least one dog in every single cut. However, if you look at the next three sentences, they're only talking about everything that a dog can bring in, right? And there's a relationship between human beings and dogs, and they are hurt and anxious and sad. It can be powerfully cost effective. However, is there any evidence that is being talked about? So presence of animals, pets in schools, right? However, the evidence is clearly not given, right? There is no study, there has been no numbers, no statistics, and therefore you can safely say that this statement is not given in the passage, right? There is reducing anxiety, which is being referred to mental health issues, children's well-being, which is again being referred to, their overall mental health. However, the evidence. So remember, the statement in full should be present in the passage. So even though the pets in school and mental health issues are covered, we do not see any evidence being marked in the passage. Right? So the method that you need to follow is read the instructions carefully, read the statements, underline the keywords, and like I said, think about all the possible synonyms, because those synonyms would help you to look for similar sounding words in the passage. Reread statement 1 and scan para 1 and 2 for the keywords. And remember, while you decide, you have to know that in order for a statement to be true, the information or the opinion of the author must exactly match with the statement in the question. And again, like I mentioned earlier, there would be distractors which you need to watch out for, because while you read the passage and while you read the question, the questions could have certain distractors which could for you seem that, oh, this could be perhaps something that is given. So if I look at the last sentence that I just did, there were distractors, because when you're as a test taker, you're saying, yes, there are pets being talked about because you're talking about dog reducing anxiety, right? There's the mental health issue because they're talking about reducing anxiety. So obviously mental health well-being is being talked about. However, the evidence, the word evidence is a key word that you need to watch out for. And remember, you might waste time looking for information that is not there. And therefore, you must intensively read and then after a while realize that, okay, this is not given and therefore I will move to the next question. Right, so you have to, so when you looked at these three that we did, we looked at scan, we looked at skim, and we looked at intensive reading. And therefore, this helps you in time management. Like I said earlier, if you're able to save your time using these strategies by reading, you will have more time to do the questions. And each type of question requires a certain kind of reading strategy. So when you're like I said, the true, false, and not given definitely requires you to do intensive reading. However, when we looked at the first, when we talked of giving, let's say if there's a heading that needs to be given to a passage, or if you need to look at, certain like numbers, we were looking at age numbers, price range, timings. Here, you're quickly scanning for a quick number, the quick information that helps you to quickly look for that information and then move forward to the next. Right? And underlining keywords is extremely important. It's very useful. Now, remember to avoid reading aloud. Skimming helps you to get the sense of the text. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, scanning leads for detailed understanding. If you noticed, I constantly talked about synonyms, and therefore synonyms can only help you if you're able to develop your vocabulary. So the more you have a large vocabulary range, the more you're able to think of the synonyms from the sentences and the text. And if you find a difficult word, don't get stuck and don't waste time on it. All right, with that, I'm now moving to the writing section, right? Let's look at the academic writing test. Your task 1 is a table or a graph or a chart or a diagram. Now remember, you must be able to describe and explain the data, right? It's very important that you describe the process or the stages of a process that has been asked, or describing an event or an object from a given picture or whatever it is that has been given to you. It could be a bar chart. We'll look at all the options just in the next slide. Now, remember, the task 1 requires 150 words at least with a 20-minute allocated. Task 2 is an essay that you need to write in response to perhaps a point of view, an argument, or a problem. Task 2 is 40 minutes and you're required to write at least 250 words. Now, responses for both the tasks should be written in a formal style, right? That is the requirement that is expected. Now, let's look at your scoring criteria. It's very important for you to understand this because this will help you to strategize and plan your writing tasks, keeping in mind the criteria of the scoring. 25% marks is for task achievement. Task achievement simply means, have you been able to achieve the task that you've been required to do? So have you been able to finish it in the time allocated? Have you been able to finish it in the number of words that have been asked from you? Have you been able to complete the task as per the required instruction? Next is your coherence and cohesion. Now remember, in coherence and cohesion, you are being scored on various criteria such as your linking devices, your discourse markers. How well have you structured your essay, right? How well have you been able to connect your thoughts and your ideas, right? So if I read the essay, am I able to flow in the essay with your mind map, right? A lot of times we have ideas, we have lots of ideas, we have lots of thoughts, right? However, they're all jumbled up in our head. And that same jumbled up thought process gets translated onto the sheet or the computer screen, whatever type of test you are taking. And therefore, it's very important for you to organize your thoughts and structure them so that you're able to score well in coherence and cohesion. The next is your lexical resource. Lexical resource simply refers to your resource to express yourself using different vocabulary words. How well are you able to talk about all the ideas that you have using good vocabulary? Now, remember, you do not need to have, very strong or difficult words. They should just be words which are not repeated. So your synonyms, again, going back to synonyms. So if you want to share your ideas, so idea, or thoughts, or perhaps ways to express your mind. So you must have synonyms to share whatever it is that you're sharing. So you should not be, so that to avoid repeating the vocabulary words. And lastly, 25% is for grammatical range and accuracy. So your sentence construction forms part of this. Your complex sentences, your compound sentences, conjunctions, punctuation, right? Even how well are you able to perhaps use auxiliary verbs, nouns? How well are you able to use your tenses, right? If it is the present tense, are you really using the correct tense from start to finish? I have seen test takers start in present tense, move on to past tense. So they range between different tenses. So whatever it is that you're trying to express, you must be very careful of the grammar, because that is where you're being marked here. All right. A lot of times test takers attempt to write complex sentences. The sentences become so long that when an examiner is reading it, he or she is not able to make sense of what is it that you're trying to express. And therefore, try and use the sentences which make sense. Even if they are short sentences, it's all right. Right? So remember, in order to score well in grammatical range and accuracy, you should not just have correct grammar, but you should also have a variety of grammar. So to score high on this, your variety needs to be more, apart from your grammar. Accuracy and variety, both are important, right? So this forms 25%. Now, keeping this criteria in mind, let's move forward and look at your part 1 of the writing test. Now, remember, I mentioned earlier that you would have either a bar chart, a line graph, table, pie chart. You could have diagrams, processes, maps, or you could have a combination of the above. So you could have a bar chart with a pie chart, right? And you've got to make sense of both, link them together, and then be able to write it in a manner that it's able to indicate exactly what the chart is talking about. So the first thing you need to keep in mind, like I said, lexical resource forms 25% of your marking criteria. So use appropriate vocabulary. Now, this is an example. Remember, I'm going back, I'm reiterating. all of these would be available on the IDP IELTS website. So any section, for example, you go into the tips for writing section, you would have adequate information on all of this. So you're requested to read further because in the interest of time, we're only touching upon the highlights of each skill set, right? So these are some of the nouns and verbs that you can use to describe the chart and graph. Now, remember, if you're talking of a rise, for example, in the sale of a particular item, or you're talking about a sharp decline, right? Or it peaked in 2015, the health of the employees had peaked. So you're using these vocabulary words to describe the trends, right? You're also using them to express them in terms of a verb. So to stabilize, to plateau, to fluctuate. The moment you're describing processes, you must be able to use vocabulary words like firstly, to begin with, the coal goes through the melting process, for example. Secondly, it's followed by this. So you're using these to actually explain the process in a step-by-step manner. In conclusion, we can safely say that this is the most viable process to get this with least carbon emissions. So that could be in conclusion, right? So how well you're able to describe the chart or the graph using the appropriate vocabulary will help you score well on the lexical resource as well as on the coherence and cohesion. Because remember, when you're using this vocabulary, you're also structuring what you're writing. And therefore, it helps you on both those parameters, right? So let's understand this with the help of a real question, all right? So if you look at step 1, right? So we're going to show up a chart that shows the value of internet downloads in the US of A from 1999 to 2008. Now you need to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, so what are our keywords that we need to look out for? They've asked us to summarize. They want us to highlight the main features, and they also want us to make comparisons wherever it is relevant. So let's look at the chart now. Now we look at the chart very carefully. You've got the years from 1999 to 2008 at the chart. On the left-hand side, you've got the values in US dollar billions, right? You've got 4 options of games, music, movie rental, and movie purchase. All 4 are highlighted with different colors. Now, remember, you need to summarize and pick up main features and also compare where it is relevant. So the first thing you need to do is to understand what it is. What are the main features? So if you look at games, right, so one great thing to do is to mark out. So whatever the chart is immediately throwing up to you, start marking it out. So the first thing you can see is that the games are definitely on an increase, right? And if you look at 2008, there's a sharp increase. Notice sharp increase, right? If you look at the second category, which is movie purchase, right? Again, there is a difference there. If you look at music, again, in music, you see some main features that perhaps in 2002, it was slightly high. But remember that you are working with a word limit, right? So perhaps not everything can be covered. However, your main features and comparisons wherever relevant are what you need to first focus on. So the model that you need to look at is summary. So you're summarizing the information, you're picking out the main features, you're looking at comparisons, and finally, you're looking at conclusion. So let's look at the summarizing first, all right? So when you summarize the information, you've got to select and report the main features. That's what the question says, right? And make comparisons wherever relevant. So the summary is in the question itself. So let's find out. Very simple. The question is, the chart shows the value of internet downloads in the USA from 1999 to 2008. So how does this help you as summarizing? The chart below shows the value of internet downloads in the USA from 1999 to 2008. We are summarizing it very simply. The bar chart depicts downloads of music, movies, and games and what they were worth in the USA over a period of 10 years. Right? So notice how we used the question itself to summarize. The bar chart, because it is a bar chart, you're depicting the value of internet. Instead of value of internet downloads, we picked up the downloads of the actual movies and games and music, which is what the chart is talking about, and what they were worth, because the left-hand side of the chart is talking about the value in billions. So what they were worth, and obviously 1999 to 2008 is a 10-year period. So over a period of 10 years. So this helps us to summarize very clearly. Now let's look at the main features. So like I spoke to you earlier when I said what the chart is speaking to you. So you need to pick up the main features as the chart speaks to you. So the first thing, if you look at the games, there has been a sharp increase. That's what I mentioned earlier, right? So if you look from 2005 to 2008, there has been a sharp increase. With music, there's been a slight decline, right? Because it's not been much of a difference. If you look at movie rental, there has been a consistent growth. And if you look at movie purchase, perhaps not much there. So the questions as test takers, what you need to ask yourself before you take out the main features are these. What stands out? What is highest? What is lowest? What has changed the most? What doesn't change? So the moment you ask yourself these questions, these answers will come to you from the chart as you look at it. Right? So like I said, what stands out? Games. What is highest? What is lowest? What changes the most? What doesn't change? So what doesn't change is your movie purchase. So these answers to these questions are going to provide you the answers to the main features, which will then help you to add them, right, in your task writing. So we can see that there was an increase in the download of games because that was the main feature that we picked up, the blue graph, movie rentals and movie purchase. However, right, the download of music fell during this period, right? So you are choosing the main features. Once you've done that, the next part of the task is asked. So here, remember, you can add more information, right? Keeping in mind the word limit, you could perhaps add more information by saying, all right, the games, there was a sharp increase in the game. Like I mentioned, when you looked at the graph, there's a sharp increase in the game from 2005 to 2008. So you could add more information on these main features, keeping in mind the word limit. But remember, the next part of the question is also asking you to choose data for comparison. So here you need to make comparisons where it's relevant. Now, the moment you're marking out from the chart, it helps you to again make comparisons. So what is the first thing that you're comparing? That the games in 1999, the value of games in US billions as compared to 1999, right? When we look at it in the year 2008, there's a huge difference. There's been a phenomenal rise or a phenomenal growth, right? So you're looking at the comparisons wherever it is relevant. The other comparison that you can look at is in the case of music, that in 2002, the level of music downloads were rather high. However, it dipped in 2004. Right? So keeping in mind your word limit, you're going to make the comparisons wherever you are able to understand that, yes, they are relevant. So generally, the tips that you need to follow are that most important to least important. Right? So for example, the games were really showing up a huge change. Right? In your bar charts, in your line graphs, the chronological feature is very important. So there is a year, there is a timeline, whatever it is that the bar chart or the line graph is talking about, keep that chronology in mind when you are describing. In the case of pie chart, you could have biggest to the smallest because pie chart talks about percentages, right? So your largest percentage versus the lowest percentage or the biggest chunk, right? For example, the pie chart is talking about a shopping retail company, which is selling maximum products for women. And then they're breaking it down. So you have two pie charts. And you're linking information from both, right? So from the biggest to the smallest. And chunks of information. That means all data for a particular period. So if you're seeing in 2000, it's a date-wise that has been given to you, and then it is also segment-wise, you pick up from a particular period and link it. So your chunk of information can then be translated into a structured sentence, which can help examiner understand that, yes, this is the trend in the chart or the graph. Now, remember to check instructions. What has the question asked you for? And have you been able to cover it all? So, for example, here it was summarizing, selecting, and comparing. So have you summarized? Have you picked up the main features? Have you been able to make comparisons where relevant? Have you been able to use the appropriate vocabulary? Because remember, the first part where you're checking instructions is being covered under task achievement. That whatever the task has required you to do, have you done it? So you're covering up your 25% of task achievement. Appropriate vocabulary, we're looking at lexical resource. Thinking about linking devices, right? So you're really using them very, very strategically because you want to now let the examiner know that this. So remember one thing we always say, the beauty of your write-up should be that it should be as accurate to the actual chart, which means that if you read your write-up, you're able to get a sense of exactly what the chart has displayed or exhibited, right? So your linking devices can work beautifully to actually bring out these selected main features and making comparisons. Think about the length of writing. You have 150 words, right? So when you are summarizing or when you're selecting the main features or when you're making comparisons, you need to know what to cover and what perhaps to leave out. That's equally important because you need to be within the word count, right? So we come back to what we started with, that it presents a table, graph, or diagram. You must be able to describe and explain, keeping in mind the word limit and the time limit, and of course, keeping in mind your criteria for scoring, right? Task 2 is an essay in response to a point of view, an argument, or a problem. Now, response for both the tasks need to be in a formal style. Task 2 requires 40 minutes and at least 250 words. We're now moving to task 2, right? So now remember, task 2 could have questions from the following. They could ask you as test takers to provide an opinion. You could be asked to highlight the advantages and disadvantages. You could also be required to highlight problems and then provide solutions to that problem. It could also be a discussion on a particular topic, or it could be a double question. Now, what we are going to cover today would be a double question type of task 2. All right. Now, some of the errors that test takers make is that in a double question, is that you don't answer both parts of the question, or you don't address both parts of the question in the introduction, right? It could also be that you don't have the right strategy for that type, because remember we talked of strategies. Very important. You have to have a strategy for every particular question type and every particular skill section, right? So let's try to understand this by way of an example. Right, so if you look here, the writing task 2 requires you to spend 40 minutes on the following task. Homeschooling is becoming increasingly popular as more and more parents are choosing to educate their children in this way. Why do you think parents choose homeschooling rather than traditional schools? Do you think homeschooling is more beneficial? Give reasons for your answer and include any relevant examples from your own knowledge or experience. Now, if you look at this task very carefully, you will realize that it is asking you two things. The second part has given you instructions on what to do, right? So it's talking of clearly about your reasons for your answer, to include relevant examples from your knowledge and experience, and you need to write 250 words. However, if you look at the first part, which is a rubric, which is talking of the exact requirement, what is it that you need to do? So if you look at the task very carefully, it has two questions. You've got first question. So the first 3 lines are talking of homeschooling, right? That homeschooling is becoming increasingly popular as more and more parents are choosing to educate their children in this way. Now, if you move to the second part, you have question 1. The first question is, why do you think parents choose homeschooling rather than traditional schooling? This is your question 1. Question 2, do you think homeschooling is more beneficial? So now if you carefully observe, you as a test taker are required to cover both these questions in order to be able to achieve your task. This is an example of a double question type of essay. Right? Now, what is the structure of this 2 question or double question type of essay? Let's look at this in detail. The first is your introduction. So your topic sentence where you're introducing your subject. Your second part is you're paraphrasing the question, and then you are following it up with an outline sentence where you're stating your answer to both the questions. So 2 questions have been asked because it's a double question or 2 question type of essay. So you're stating your answer to both those. You move on to the main body, para 1, where you're answering the first question because they've asked you 2 questions. So you're looking at answering the first question first, which is the topic sentence and stating your answer. Following it up with explanation. So you will need to have one developed idea to explain. Then you need to have the second developed idea to explain. And then you're giving examples, which could be 1 to 2. The third part is your main body para 2, where you're answering the second question. And again, you are stating your answer with the topic sentence. Again, you're giving an explanation by developing one idea, which is idea number 3, and developing the fourth idea, which is idea number 4. And again, giving 1 to 2 examples, followed by a conclusion. So remember, these are the 4 things that you need to have in mind, and in order to achieve your task, all of these 4 need to happen. Right? So let's look at this more in detail with the help of this example. So you're stating your answer to both questions. You're answering question 1 and you're answering question 2. You're developing idea 1, you're developing idea 2, you're developing idea 3, which is for question 2, and you're developing idea 4 for question 2 again. And you have your examples, which have been given for both answering question 1 as well as to answer question 2. Now, why should you plan your essay? Now, remember what I said earlier. You will have a lot of ideas, you will have a lot of thoughts. However, they need to be organized. So the moment you plan your essay, the first thing you're able to achieve is saving time. The next is achieving your task achievement. Because the moment you're planning your essay, you are looking at all the things that you need to cover. So you're answering all parts of the question, you're presenting your relevant ideas, and you're giving your supporting points, and you're doing all this within the word limit, right? So it helps you to save time. It helps you to ensure that you have achieved your task by responding to everything that has been asked in the question. You are organizing your ideas and you're linking your paragraphs. Remember, you are marked for paragraphs as well. How well you have organized and structured your essay will help you score a good band and will help you get more marks for the coherence and cohesion. Now, let's come to how to generate ideas, because every single question that the task requires you to do, you need to have an explanation, right? So in order to have an explanation, you need to have the idea. So the first step is to brainstorm, right? So when you attend your IELTS classes, the more topics you write about, the more you will brainstorm on those different topics and the more ideas you would have. And these ideas would help you when you are in your actual test time, because all those ideas will actually come to you. Creating a mind map. This helps you to structure all that's going on in your mind. I may have so many things to write. However, if I don't have a mind map, I'm likely to overlook some important points. So it's very important that you have a mind map, which helps you, okay, this is my main idea. This is my second idea. This is how I'm going to move to third idea. Asking a friend technique. So remember, whilst you're preparing for IELTS, you must be preparing for different topics. And while you prepare for these different topics, you can use your friends to generate more ideas, to think of more ways of addressing a particular topic. And it will help you to grow your knowledge. And lastly, example technique, right? Where you're really using examples, because remember, this will help you to build on your idea more. And it will also help you to use giving these examples while you're writing your essay. Right? So let's look at certain tips on idea generation. Right? A lot of times you can simply generate ideas without writing about the essay. So you could get into discussions, dialogues, debates. Right? So when you're talking to each other, when you're discussing, you are generating ideas, even though you may not be writing them. However, these ideas on those particular topics are coming to you. Read a lot of model essays and look at the main ideas in these model essays. That can greatly help you as well. You could look for ideas on the internet. Today, the net is full of essays, samples, ideas, you name it, and there is a topic. ChatGPT is your another option to pick up a lot of ideas on various topics. Because the moment you have ideas, it will help you to then make a broad framework and structure it to put it on paper, right? Ask each other additional questions, because this helps you to build on your idea, or to build on what you want to write and how you want to write. So these are a few tips on how you can help improving your ideas, generating more ideas, have more knowledge on particular topics. Now let's look at analyzing and planning with the help of this example, right? Now, if you look at the two questions, right, we're looking at question 2. In question 2, do you think homeschooling is more beneficial? Now, what the task is typically doing is it's asking for your view. What do you think? So the moment you think, do you think, it's your view, right? So what they're really asking is homeschooling better than traditional schooling? Even though they haven't mentioned it in so many words, but it is understood that do you think homeschooling is more beneficial? So more beneficial than traditional schooling, right? So you need to understand and analyze the question, break it down, because that will help you to plan your answer. So your paragraph 2 ideas would be, is homeschooling better than traditional schooling? So you say no. When you say no, why? Because you have no friends. So it doesn't help you to develop your social skills, right? In today's day and age, we're looking at building our teamwork. We're looking at collaboration. The more interpersonal skills you have, the more successful you can be, right? So when you are homeschooling, you're not able to develop your team's building skills. And lastly, professional teachers. So in a traditional schooling system, you have access to professional teachers, to people who are trained, who are experts, and who are there to teach you and give you this schooling. So is homeschooling better than traditional schooling? We're saying no, and these are our ideas. Now, let's say you want to work with one particular idea. That is something you need to now decide and plan. Now, the moment you begin writing, you need to have an introduction structure like we talked about. So your introduction is talking of introducing the subject, your topic sentence, paraphrasing your question, outlining sentence where you're stating your answer to both questions. Right? So here's an example. Getting a school education is a fundamental step in a child's development. right? We're talking about the introduction. Homeschooling is becoming increasingly popular as more and more parents are choosing to educate their children in this way. Now, this is what was given in the passage. Now, we're paraphrasing it. Nowadays, many parents prefer to educate their young ones at home rather than send them to traditional school. You simply paraphrased and you are stating the outlining of the sentence. This essay will discuss why some parents find homeschooling convenient. It will also give reasons why traditional schooling is a better option. Right? So this is how you are planning the introduction. So I'm going back to the next slide is simply covering this up. Instead of the breakdown here, we're now making it into a paragraph. Getting a school education is a fundamental step in child's development. Some parents prefer to educate their young ones at home rather than send them to a school. And this essay will discuss why traditional schooling is a far better option, even though some parents may prefer the convenience of homeschooling. So this covers your introduction. Now we're coming to the answer to the question where you're looking at the main body, where you have the first paragraph, where you're answering the first question. So you're stating your answer, you're developing the idea, and you're following it up with examples, right? So let's look at this. There are two main reasons why parents may choose to homeschool their children. Firstly, it is more convenient and comfortable for a child to study in a familiar home environment. Parents may feel that their children will be able to do their best when they study at their own pace and schedule, rather than by following a school timetable. Now, what's happening here? You're giving your answer to question number 1. What was question number 1? If I go back, just to remind you, question number 1 was, why do you think parents are opting for homeschooling rather than traditional schooling? Right? That was question number 1. So why are parents choosing homeschooling, which typically means that you're giving advantages of homeschooling from the parents' perspective, right? So after your introduction, you're giving 2 reasons. Remember, we talked of idea number 1 and idea number 2, your explanation 1 and explanation 2. So first is that they find it more convenient and comfortable to study in a familiar home environment. Parents feel that their children will be able to do their best when they study at their own pace and schedule. So it's more customized, right? So you're not sticking to a school timetable. And the next you can talk about is that their child gets individual attention. So homeschooling for them is a preferred option. And then you move on to giving examples. Remember, we talked of examples. So 1 to 2 examples. So a child who is slow with reading, for example, will benefit more with homeschooling. Why? Because he or she is being given individual attention and being able to read at his own pace and develop at his own pace, rather than within a large group of students where he may not be able to get that benefit. Right? Here, you can also look at another example where you might talk about a child who might be perhaps, somebody who is weak in one particular subject or in one particular, let's say in STEM. So any kind of science and math is what he requires more learning. Or you can talk of kinesthetic learners who have a learning capability by touching and sensing. So homeschooling allows them to have a more kinesthetic form of learning, which is their learning style. That could be your second example. But remember, you need to have them structured before you start writing them, so that you are covering your coherence and cohesion, right? And you're going to do the same thing for paragraph 2, right? So in paragraph 2, like I talked about, the second question that they were asking is, when we already covered that, so I'm not going into that why traditional schooling is better, right? So we talked of the advantages of traditional schooling, where you said that your teamwork, your social skills, or expert teachers are something that the child has access to. right? And you can give an example there in the case of sharing, that a child who studies in the school is more equipped or is better prepared to share with others, simply because he's studying with a group of students rather than individually, right? So you're doing the same process with the same examples and the same idea generation and explaining your idea and moving forward to your conclusion, right? So it's very important for you to sum up your ideas. Don't make new points and don't give more examples in your conclusion, because your conclusion is simply to summarize or sum up whatever you have talked about. And remember, do not write too much. So a conclusion example here. In conclusion, homeschooling is a popular choice these days, and some parents like to educate their children at home. However, there are more benefits in sending children to school, even though homeschooling can be a convenient option. So you're summing it up here because you have given the advantages of traditional schooling. You have also given the advantages of why parents are choosing homeschooling, right? And then you have given your own views on traditional schooling, because that's what the task required you to do. That do you think traditional schooling is better? And therefore, in the end, you're concluding in 4 sentences, right? So remember, when you talked of the introduction, it was very similar. If you look at the introduction, some parents prefer to educate their young ones at home rather than send them to school. And this essay will discuss traditional schooling as a far better option, even though some parents prefer convenience of homeschooling. So when you look at the conclusion, it could be a well rephrased introduction, right? So you're rephrasing it and saying something similar, where you're saying homeschooling is a popular choice these days, and some parents like to educate their children at home. However, there are more benefits in sending children to school, even though homeschooling can be a convenient option, right? So what problems do test takers have? You could, because of, the double question, if you looked at the double question here, it could be a possibility that you omit writing all parts of the question, or you go off topic and therefore, you end up exceeding your word limit. Or you write about ideas without developing on them, because whatever idea you had writing, you need to develop and give your explanation. It's extremely important. It helps you to, again, structure. All right. Lack of vocabulary could lead you to repeat your words and thereby losing your score. Right? A lot of times, test takers learn to write either very simple sentences, short sentences, or like I mentioned earlier, 2 long-winded sentences. So they are so long that an examiner has to reread the sentence to understand where the sentence started with. It might have started with one idea, and by the time it ended, there was another idea or 2 ideas inserted into the same sentence, leading to confusion. Right? And again, losing marks on coherence and cohesion. And the last, not using an appropriate academic writing style, because remember, you're expected to write in a formal style. So if you end up using informal tone, you will lose scores here, right? Let's move on to our last section for the day, which is the speaking section. Now, remember, this is a face-to-face with an examiner in a room. So whether you're taking the paper-based test or the computer-based test, this section would still be a face-to-face test with the examiner. It is recorded. All right, the examiner will encourage you to speak more because they want to see your language proficiency. So the more you speak, right, more they would be able to assess you. This test lasts not more than 14 minutes. So 11 to 14 minutes is the time span. The examiner who is asking you the question may or may not be the one who is deciding your results at the end of the test. All right, and you as the test taker will decide the length of your answers, because the examiner has asked you a question. You are at liberty to answer at whatever length you want to. All right. So the test comprises of your ID check. There's a greeting, right? Part 1 is a question and answer, which is introduction and interview. So you'll have, a basic frame where they're asking you whether you work or you study, what do you do, etc. They will move on to 2 other topics where they might want to know, for example, if you like reading. So these are very basic questions about you as a test taker, right? Part 2 is a talk for 3 to 4 minutes. So this is like a mini presentation. You'll be given a topic. You need to speak on that topic for 2 minutes. Remember, you'll be given 1 minute preparation time here. And part 3 is an interaction. So you're interacting and discussing with the examiner. It's a question form where he or she will keep asking you about what do you think about something. All right. So let's look at the format. Time 4 to 5 minutes for part 1. Right. You'll be asked questions about you and your life. Like I said, it's going to be all about you. So your home, your family, where do you study? Or if you don't study, do you work? What work do you do? About your hometown, your hobbies, your interests, your likes, your dislikes, right? So an typical example could be what kind of food you like eating the most. Who does the cooking in your home, right? Do you watch cookery programs on TV? In general, do you prefer eating at home or eating out? Right? So what is the marking criteria for speaking test? Again, more details on all of this would be available on the IELTS IDP website or the IELTS.org, BritishCouncil.org website. You can read further about it. The marking criteria is fluency and coherence. So how fluent are you, right? How coherent are you? Your lexical resource, again, your vocabulary, right? How well are you able to express, share your ideas, your thoughts, and how much vocabulary that you're using, you're not repeating. The words you're not repeating. Your grammatical range and accuracy. So whether you are speaking, are you using passive voice or active voice? Are you using auxiliary verbs? Are you using conditionals? Are you using interrogative sentences? Are you making are you using complex sentences? All of that is covered under grammatical range and accuracy. And then lastly, your pronunciation, your phoneme, your speech rate, your pauses, all of these are covered under pronunciation, right? So again, what is the method? Answer the question in one sentence. So what kind of food do you like to eat? I enjoy eating Chinese food, for example. Then extend the answer to add 1 or 2 more sentences. So, for example, you could say, I enjoy eating Chinese food. However, but when I was young, or because I'm working or I have long working hours, I don't get to eat Chinese food very often. Right? So you extend the answer by adding 1 or 2 more sentences. And avoid using the same words as the examiner, because again, remember, you're being assessed on your language proficiency. So the more wide your lexical resources, the higher the band you receive. All right. Now, you could also be asked about living places. Where do you live? What kind of place is it? What is the most interesting part of your village or your town? What kind of jobs do people in your town or village do? Would you say it's a good place to live? You say yes. They say, okay, why? Right? Now, again, here you've again got a mind map. Okay. So in part 2, you will be given 1 minute preparation time. You will be given some of the things that you can cover. Right? So in this 1 minute, you need to quickly think of what all you will cover when you speak, because you have to speak for 2 minutes, right? And they are not going to interrupt you before 2 minutes. So let's say the part 2 requires you to describe a lake or a river or a sea that you visited. What you need to ensure, which will be given to you in your instructions in the examiner, from the examiner, you will receive this. So you should say where the lake or river is, how often have you visited it, what activities do you do there, and explain why you like this particular place. So you need to quickly think that, okay, where is it? All right, whatever district, whatever national park or city, wherever it is, right? How often? Oh, I used to go there every summer, or I have gone there for many years in my childhood, right? What activities did you do there? So I did, let's say I did boating, I did kayaking. We used to do a lot of sailing, or we used to walk a lot, right? Why do you like this place? So you need to have a reason. So maybe my childhood memories. I've spent the most beautiful years of my childhood with my parents and my friends and my family in this lake and doing activities around this area, and it holds a very special place in my heart, right? So you talk about why you like that particular place. So 2 minutes you have to speak on this. Now part 3. Now remember, part 3 is linked to part 2. So for example, if they talked about your favorite place or your river or the lake or whatever, you're likely to get similar questions on leisure time. So things like, oh, would you say, that the amount of free time has changed much in the last 50 years? Why do you think this has happened? Right? Do you think people will have more or less time of free time in the future? Why? So you need to quickly, these are more about abstract ideas, right? So remember, you need to quickly have presence of mind to share what do you feel. Now remember, they are not testing you for correct or incorrect answers. They are testing you for how well you're able to express yourself, how fluent you are, and how effortlessly you're able to speak on a different variety of topics. Right? How in your country, how much time do people spend on work and how much time on leisure? Is it a good balance? Right? What do you think? Do you think balance is important for life, for success? They could build on this. So it's a conversation, it's a discussion, it's an interaction. Now, common mistakes that test takers make, they memorize answers. So remember, the moment you're memorizing answers in part 3 is where you lose the scores. Because in part 3, it's a discussion. So your memorized answers won't work, right? Some of the other mistakes could be going off topic. If the examiner is asking you about a particular sport, you have to stay with that topic and not go off to, let's say, talking of yoga and meditation and other things, right? You stay with the topic. Avoid giving yes or no answers because they are, again, like I said, I'm reiterating, they are testing you for your language proficiency, and they can only test you if you give them material to test you. So you need to speak more, right? So give extended answers, right? If you don't pick up the keywords in the question, you're likely to give an incorrect answer. And sometimes we end up repeating the same words or phrases for lack of vocabulary bank. So remember, I'm reiterating, building your vocabulary will help you score well on all the 4 skill set. All right. More information on all of these is available on the IELTSidpindia.com. You also have the IELTS.org, BritishCouncil.org, Take IELTS website. Of course, you've got your various other website links on the screen, which can help you to build your academic word list, the Oxford dictionaries. And with that, I come to the end of the session. And any questions that I could address, Beyant, I would request you to let me know any questions that have been addressed in the chat box.
Yes,
So the next 5
Namrata,
minutes.
there are a few questions.
Yeah.
Firstly, the recording of this session will not be available for your use. And regarding PPT, Namrata, is the PPT available for them?
Yes, I will check on that and share with you.
Sure. The first question is, for example, there's a question in which you have to mention yes, no. And
Yes.
what will happen if we answer it as true or false?
What will happen if the answer is true or false?
But if we answer it as true or false?
No, so the question will clearly say that is the below statement true, false, or not given.
Yes.
So when you read the passage, it will be very clear for you to know that, okay, is this true? So if that information in the question is absolutely and clearly visible and available in the passage, you will answer true. If the statement to the contradictory is available in the passage, you will answer false. And if there is no mention of that statement at all in the passage, then you will answer not given. Like we did in the example here, where the question said evidence. There was no evidence. There was no report. There was no statistical data. So we simply chose the option not given. And obviously, if you choose the wrong option, then you lose the marks.
What happens if we write yes instead of true?
You will lose marks because they are very clear with what needs to be given. So you need to stick to the
Okay, the next question is, will the questions 1, 2, 3
instructions to the T? And that's why it's important to read the instructions.
Excellent.
Sorry. Yeah.
Will the questions 1, 2, 3 always be asked as per the sequence of the passage? For example, will the statement 1 always have its answers in para 1 or 2?
Yes, sometimes yes. However, a great practice is that when you're reading the passage, you can underline the keywords. So for example, when I'm after my scan, when I'm skim reading, and let's say I'm reading a passage that's talking of technology or phones, I can keep underlining that. So what happens is when I read the question and I see, okay, this is on technology, I will quickly go back to that passage. So it will save time and it will help me to only pick up that information that is asked in the question. And that's why we talked of reading the questions before reading the passage. So do a scan, do a quick, broad understanding of the text, then look at the questions and then go back to the passage. So then you have a sense of what you're looking for because you've already read the questions.
The next question is, the minimum word limit for task 1 and task 2 is 150 and 250 words respectively. Is there a cap on how many words one should write, like the maximum word limit?
So plus minus, let's say if it's 250, you can go up to 260, 265. That's not a problem.
Okay. And are the articles A and the counted as single words?
Yes, yes, they are, yes.
And there's one question, don't we have a letter writing section in the writing task?
Yes, we do. Letter writing section. So what we discussed in the task 1 here was the academic. So in your general writing, you will have the letter writing. So those of you who are taking general IELTS, you will have task 1 as letters. Any other questions?
Okay. No, the rest of the questions were related to registration part that I have already answered.
All right.
Does anyone still have questions? There are like 3 hands raised. So
Yeah, I can see Khushi and Rhythm and
please
maybe you can unmute. Yeah, we can take up the last 4 questions. You can unmute their mics and they can quickly ask last 4 questions before we wind up.
Okay, Ravi, you can unmute yourself. He has raised his hand.
My question
Yes.
section, for example, examiner ask my hometown, so I give answer like my hometown is Mumbai and is very popular for femininity. Okay.
Not sorry. I'm not
Ravi,
I'm not
yes.
able to hear him clearly.
Ravi, you have a lot of background noise, so request you to please write your question in the chat box. Okay. Rhythm, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, thank you. I just need to ask in the reading section, will the questions 1, 2, 3 always be in the sequence of the passage? Like, will statement 1 always have its answer in paragraph 1 or 2, or it can be random in sequence?
So yeah, I just answered this question a while ago. So it can be random. So what I would recommend is when you're doing so remember the strategy. So when you're doing a quick scan reading, you'll have a broad idea of the passage. When you're doing the skim reading, underline the keywords. So they'll help you to know what exactly is the information available in which passage. And then when you read the questions, you know exactly at the time of intensive reading that, okay, this question is asking me about, let's say, carbon emission. So where did I read carbon emission? Passage number 1. So you quickly jump to that passage and read, like I showed you the example when we looked at the pricing and the age limit and the time of the walking tours. So the moment you look for that information, you know, and you're looking for a specific information, read the sentences above and below. So it'll give you a sense of what's happening in that passage. So it helps you to save time because usually, there's no set practice that they will be in the order of the passage. To answer your question, Rhythm. All right. Any one last question from anyone else?
Actually, there is a question in the chat box. Do they cut marks for stammering during speaking test?
Not really, because if you're stammering because of nervousness versus stammering because it is a genuine stammer, depends on that. So again, while you meet the examiner, a lot of things, because remember it's face to face, so your confidence level, your ability to present yourself will matter, and Of course, if your stammer is because of nervousness, they will be able to identify that because these examiners are trained, right? So they know that what exactly is going on. So you will be marked on your language proficiency and not the other things.
Okay, one more question. Hi, ma'am. Just want to ask you about report writing. As you have mentioned, conclusion. Do we need to write this title while writing the conclusion?
Which title? Conclusion.
Yes.
No, we don't need to write that. Your last paragraph, when you're writing all in all, or above all, or overall, this can be your, discourse marker, and you can just simply write the last 4 lines, and that in itself is self-explanatory that you're talking about the conclusion. So you don't need to write any heading for anything.
Okay, one more question. In speaking, does all the 3 parts hold the same weightage, or cue card is the most important?
In speaking part 3 is where they're really assessing you for a higher band. Because remember, part 1 is fairly simple because you're very familiar with yourself. You're answering questions about yourself, your own likes and dislikes. Part 2 is where you're speaking for 2 minutes. So they're assessing you that, okay, is this test taker band 6 or 7? And by the time they reach part 3, that's when they are really checking, because here you are in a discussion, right? So the discussion is where you're likely to really showcase your proficiency here, because you're sharing your ideas, your views, your thoughts. What is it that you feel? It's very on the spot. There are no fixed questions here. So for a higher band score, doing well in part 3 is very important. All right. So I think we can close the session, Bent, if all questions are done.
Yes, Khushi wants to ask a question.
Yes, Khushi.
Khushi, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. So, ma'am, in case of listening and reading, when we have to select 2 letters, that is 2 options, and if I have one right and one wrong, still I will be losing for both the marks, or will I get that 1 mark for the one right answer?
No, you'll get 1 mark for the right answer, but you will
Thank
lose the mark for the wrong answer.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me this morning. Wishing you all the best for your tests. Like I said, please visit the website, read more on all the top tips, prepare yourself, and please do as many practice tests as possible. Read as much as you can, generate ideas, follow all the tips that we discussed today, and hope that you all can do well and get your bands that you aspire to get. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Namrata, and thank you everyone for joining in today's session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.